So maybe your iPhone that costs $999 now may cost $1,599 after the tariffs are imposed. Hello, January 2025, and Donald Trump almost in office. Not yet, almost. But his influence already touches the world. And when it comes to the world of supply chain, that already started exactly in November, the moment his victory was announced. How? I'm going to show you today. Well, let's go back a couple months. Summer of 2024. Ordering was not so great. Chinese economy is known to be relatively weak. People complain that it's hard to find a job. We have youth unemployment in China. Well, what's the solution for the Chinese government? We just don't announce the numbers and there's no problem, right? So that was the summer 2024. Now, November 2024, our big elephant in the room announced he will be the winner. And he wants to put tariffs on Chinese products. 60%, he says. Okay, so what does your importer says? Okay, he's coming on January 20. Let's get as many products in before he's in office. What does it mean for the factory? Great, you get orders. And maybe you get some deposits. Now you need to pay for the materials. You need to hire workers. You have to get things going. So we start running, because the ships that didn't leave by late December 2024 not going to make it before January 20 to reach Los Angeles. Some products will be shipped by air. So factories were quite reasonably busy. Only problem was that some of the factory owners, they face quite a different challenge. They may have bank accounts full of money, but they can't pull the money out to pay their people. So they paid first the raw material makers because no material, no work. And now we hear the stories that a lot of the staff that's working in those factories hasn't been paid or hasn't been fully paid for several months. Maybe not because the factory owner didn't want to pay them, he was simply not able to. There are stories that a lot of bosses have challenges to withdraw cash from the banks to pay the red envelopes for Chinese New Year. And obviously, if you have been working 6 months without being paid, you are not the nicest employee to your boss anymore. Or would you like to work 6 months for free? If you like to, maybe you want to go to China. That's the far-reaching effect of Donald Trump's front-loading, as we call it, front-loading to get the goods in. Well, we see now that the ordering situation after Chinese New Year is anything but certain. And how many people will be back in Dongguan, Shenzhen, and Huizhou, Foshan, Panyu? We'll see. But I expected it's not going to be so busy, to say the least. Donald Trump talks about tariffs. He says he loves tariffs. He says it's a beautiful word. Me, coming from manufacturing, I completely disagree. It's a terrible word. But now, how do tariffs actually work? Well, tariffs is like a movie ticket for your goods, which is being taken at the port of entry. Apple just launched the iPhone 16 Pro. Retail price in the US, $999 US. And since it's telecommunication equipment, it is duty-free, meaning there's no duty on phones up to now for the import. If Donald Trump moves ahead and implements the 60% tariff, we can calculate what that would be in case the procurement price doesn't change. So let's assume Apple has a 50% profit margin. So out of the factory, the $999 iPhone probably only costs $500. So if we take the $500, now we add 60% tariff, which is $300. So the arrival price will be $800 in the US. Now we take the typical markup of our friends at Apple. So then $800 make it $1,600. So maybe your iPhone that costs $999 now may cost $1,599 after the tariffs are imposed. So maybe you better buy it soon before the tariff hits. Or maybe Donald Trump is just making noise and everything comes different anyway. We don't know. We will see. What we do know is that we don't know what's coming, because that's the business model of Mr. Trump. So why do governments do this? Or why does Donald Trump wants to do it? Because he believes he can convince companies like Mercedes-Benz to produce the car in the United States. And to an extent, he may be right. To an extent, because not everything is moved overnight. And the workers and the supply chain and everything else will also cost money. So although there is an intent, the first impact is that it's actually a tax. It's a tax that you, as a consumer, have to pay for the product that you want to buy. And in the end of the day, so we believe, okay, we charge people overseas that we can lower the taxes domestically. And if you don't buy a Mercedes-Benz, you don't have to pay that tax. Or let's say the product that comes from outside. So there might be a way to work it. But how it really works, it will lead to a countermeasure. So for instance, there are products that are going the other way around. So the other country will not just sit by and say, oh yeah, you charge a tax and I will just pay it and fine. No. What are the unintended consequences of trade policies such as the announced implementation of tariffs? A typical one is rush manufacturing. Rush manufacturing is you try to hit your arrival deadline before the tariffs or the trade policy becomes effective. Well, rush production is really not so good for your quality, because a worker that's working 13, 14 hours instead of 8 hours will not be as concentrated as a well-rested regular employee. But sorry, we need to meet the deadline. So based on our experience, rush manufacturing leads to the tendency of taking shortcuts, of things slip through the quality control. So basically, you probably end up with poorer quality, whether you want it or not. So that's why one of the key elements for this rush production is that it really needs to be well managed, because it's not going to be the same. And whether the quality will become a boomerang in the end depends on how impactful the quality mismatch is. So I would be very careful when trying to push everything through the door. Okay, another consequence is that the consumer is not necessarily willing to pay for the tariff. Or the retailer, like Mr. Walton, who loves the everyday low prices, will tell its manufacturer, sorry, the market price is like this, tariff is part of the cost, you have to cut your cost or we cannot buy from you. Well, the factory has two choices: produce at a lower cost or not produce at all. And when it comes to the worker, how would you react when your worker says, well, I give you two choices. Either you work for 50% of the salary or you work twice as many hours for the same salary. What would you answer? Probably say, and I take a different job. Well, good luck in China, if there are enough jobs, because it's very tough to find a job there right now. And the same thing will be pushed down the supply chain. So a lot of material, they will be asking inside their supply chain to make cuts. And these cuts will lead to shortcuts. Shortcuts usually go to the expense of quality. So if you are in the supply chain, you need to be super, super vigilant to make sure the quality is not compromised at the wrong time. Otherwise, we will see a lot of actually dangerous products entering the market. They were just made to meet that cost target, to offset the tariff. And what we can see in China right now is that a lot of factories will probably relocate in order to circumvent the taxes. So we already hear stories about warehouses in Mexico becoming very expensive because they are rented by Chinese manufacturers. Also, production lines in Vietnam becoming very busy there. And that will lead to shortages on other sides. For instance, getting enough electricity in Vietnam is a challenge by itself, because there are so many factories that suddenly want to produce, and power plants are also not built overnight. So, then the person who has the best relationship to the electricity company is the one that can actually produce, because they will get the electricity. So, I don't know exactly what's going to happen in 2025, but what I do know is it's going to be a very, very interesting year. And I guess it's going to become a messy year when it comes to supply chains. So get ready, take your popcorn out, and we'll get ready to watch the show. It's going to be an interesting show. So question to you, do you depend on a supply out of South China? Or maybe your supplier depends on the supplier out of this area. Do you have adequate stock? Are you prepared? Are you ready for the year of the snake? Or will you need to change your skin, just like a snake does? Now is the time to think about it. And you will have a good 1 to 2 weeks of the Chinese New Year holiday, where you will definitely not be bothered by any Chinese supplier at that time. But are you sure that after the holiday is over, that you can still find your partner? Or does your partner still find his partner? If not, maybe do you have a plan? Do you know what you're going to do? Do you have enough stock? We at Selenius here in Taiwan, we are bracing for the impact. We are getting ready for the time after Chinese New Year, because whatever happens, we're still going to need to produce goods, whether it's in China or elsewhere. No matter what happens, people still want their stuff. And it means people that take care of that. If it helped you, please feel free to subscribe and click the bell and see what other content we can offer. Thank you.